Before we begin, let me ask you a question that may feel uncomfortable, but it's an honest one. If your life stayed exactly the same for the next 5 years, your habits, your income, your mindset, your routines, would you be proud of where you end up? Or would you quietly regret what you didn't change? Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they keep postponing the decision to rebuild. We tell ourselves we'll start when things slow down, when motivation arrives, when circumstances improve. But life doesn't pause while we wait. Every day that passes is either reinforcing who we've been or building who we're becoming. There comes a moment when continuing the same way becomes more painful than changing. That moment often arrives disguised as frustration, disappointment, or a sense that you were meant for more than this. It's not a sign of failure, it's a signal. A signal that something inside you is asking for an upgrade. The question is not whether your past has flaws or whether your journey has been smooth. The real question is whether you are willing to take responsibility for the next chapter. Because no matter how strong the storm has been, the power to rebuild has always been within your reach. Waiting for a decision that turns reflection into action and intention into progress, personal responsibility, is the moment a person stops, handing over the steering wheel of their life to circumstances, people, or luck, and takes it back into their own hands. It means recognizing that where you are today, financially, emotionally, mentally, and even spiritually, is largely the result of choices made over time. This idea can feel uncomfortable at first because it removes excuses, but that discomfort is exactly where growth begins. As long as someone believes their situation is caused mainly by external forces, they remain powerless to change it. The instant responsibility is accepted, power returns, because the same force that created the result can also create new ones. Taking responsibility does not mean denying that life is unfair, that obstacles exist, or that other people influence outcomes. It simply means refusing to let those realities become permanent explanations for staying stuck. Two people can face the same circumstances and end up in completely different places because their responses are different. One responds with blame, resentment, and passivity. The other responds with learning, adjustment, and action. Responsibility lives in that response. It is the understanding that while you may not control everything that happens, you always control what you do next. When someone avoids responsibility, they often develop the habit of complaining. Complaining feels productive, but it changes nothing. Responsibility replaces complaints with questions like, what can I do differently? Or what skill do I need to develop? These questions shift the mind from defense to progress. Growth begins the moment a person looks inward instead of outward for answers. This internal shift changes how problems are viewed not as personal attacks, but as signals pointing toward improvement. Personal responsibility also builds character. Each time a person admits a mistake without excuses, they strengthen honesty. Each time they accept the consequences of their choices, they build resilience. Over time, this mindset creates consistency, because progress is no longer dependent on motivation or perfect conditions. It becomes rooted in decision and discipline. People who accept responsibility stop waiting to be rescued and start building. They begin to see that their daily habits, attitudes, and standards quietly shape their future. What once felt like limitation slowly reveals itself as leverage, because ownership creates direction, and direction creates momentum. Change that lasts never begins with external adjustments. It begins with internal alignment. People often try to improve their lives by changing their jobs, their location, or the people around them. Yet they carry the same thinking patterns, beliefs, and habits into each new situation. When the inner structure remains unchanged, the outer results eventually return to familiar levels. This is why real rebuilding must start within. A person's thoughts shape decisions, decisions shape actions, and actions repeated over time shape outcomes. Without addressing the root how one thinks and interprets life, surface changes offer only temporary relief. Inner change begins with awareness. Most people operate on mental autopilot, guided by inherited beliefs, past experiences, and emotional reactions they rarely question. These internal programs influence what feels possible, what feels safe, and what feels worth attempting. When someone starts examining their beliefs, they begin to notice how often their limitations are self-imposed. Statements like "this is just how I am," or "people like me don't succeed," quietly dictate behavior. Rebuilding yourself requires challenging these internal narratives, not with blind positivity, but with deliberate reasoning and evidence. New thinking creates new options. Emotions also play a critical role in internal change. Unresolved fear, resentment, or self-doubt can sabotage even the best plans. When emotions are left unexamined, they drive behavior from the shadows. Addressing them does not mean suppressing or dramatizing them, but understanding their origin and influence. Emotional maturity allows a person to respond intentionally rather than react impulsively. This shift alone can transform relationships, productivity, and self-respect. Inner change expresses itself through habits. Habits are the physical evidence of internal beliefs. A person who values growth reads, reflects, and practices. A person who believes effort is pointless avoids challenge. When beliefs shift, habits naturally follow. This is why discipline becomes easier when identity changes. You no longer force yourself to act differently. You act differently because you see yourself differently. As internal standards rise, external circumstances begin to adjust. People notice different opportunities, make better decisions, and tolerate less of what once drained them. The world does not magically change, but the way it is navigated does. Success, confidence, and fulfillment are not imported from outside sources. They are drawn out from inner development. When the inside is rebuilt with clarity, intention, and integrity, the outside eventually reflects that work. Because life consistently aligns with the level of person you choose to become. Most people overestimate what can be achieved in a short burst of effort and underestimate what consistent action can produce over time. Big results are rarely the outcome of dramatic, one-time decisions. They are built quietly through small choices made again and again. A single action may seem too minor to matter, but when repeated daily, it gains power through accumulation. This is how progress really works, not in leaps, but in layers. Each small action adds a brick, and over time those bricks become a structure that appears impressive only because its foundation was patiently laid. Small actions are effective because they are manageable. Large goals often create resistance because they feel overwhelming, while small steps feel achievable and non-threatening. Reading 10 pages a day feels easy, yet over a year, it becomes several books worth of knowledge. Saving a small amount consistently feels insignificant until it compounds into security. These actions require less motivation because they demand less energy, which makes them sustainable. Sustainability is what separates temporary effort from lasting change. Consistency also builds identity. When a person keeps a small promise to themselves repeatedly, they begin to see themselves differently. Confidence grows not from grand achievements, but from evidence of reliability. Each repeated action reinforces the belief that progress is possible and within control. This internal shift encourages further action, creating a positive cycle where effort feeds belief and belief fuels effort. Momentum forms quietly, often unnoticed at first, but once established, it becomes difficult to stop. Time amplifies whatever is practiced consistently. Small positive habits grow into strength, skill, and opportunity, while small negative habits grow into limitations and regret. The danger of inconsistency is not failure, but stagnation. When effort is sporadic, results remain unstable. Consistency, on the other hand, smooths the path forward. Even imperfect action, when repeated, outperforms perfect intentions that are rarely executed. The power of small actions also lies in their ability to bypass fear. Big moves invite self-doubt and hesitation, while small actions feel safe enough to attempt. Over time, these small steps expand comfort zones naturally. What once felt difficult becomes normal, and what once seemed impossible becomes approachable. Progress becomes a lifestyle rather than a struggle. When people commit to small, consistent actions, they are no longer chasing motivation or waiting for the right moment. They are building a system that works regardless of mood, circumstance, or external pressure, allowing long-term success to emerge As a natural consequence of disciplined repetition, learning is the primary driver of meaningful progress, because it changes how a person thinks before it changes what a person does. Without learning, effort is often misdirected. Repeated mistakes go uncorrected, and growth eventually plateaus. When someone commits to learning, they upgrade their understanding of how the world works, how people behave, and how results are produced. This expanded understanding leads to better decisions, and better decisions naturally lead to better outcomes. Improvement rarely comes from working harder alone. It comes from working wiser, and wisdom is the product of learning. Learning reshapes perspective. It allows a person to see beyond immediate circumstances and recognize patterns, principles, and cause and effect relationships. Instead of reacting emotionally to setbacks, a learner studies them. Failure becomes information rather than a verdict. This mindset reduces fear because mistakes are no longer viewed as proof of inadequacy but as feedback for refinement. With each lesson absorbed, confidence grows, not the loud kind, but the quiet confidence rooted in understanding. A commitment to learning also increases adaptability. The world changes constantly, and those who rely only on what they already know eventually fall behind. Learning keeps a person flexible, open, and relevant. New skills expand options, and new ideas create alternatives where none seem to exist. This adaptability is especially powerful because it allows progress even when external conditions are unfavorable. A learner does not wait for perfect circumstances. They prepare for whatever circumstances arrive. Learning influences behavior through awareness. Once a person knows better, it becomes difficult to act the same way as before. Awareness raises standards. A person who understands the impact of their habits becomes more intentional with their time and energy. Learning also sharpens self-reflection. It encourages thoughtful evaluation of beliefs, values, and goals, aligning actions with long-term vision rather than short-term comfort. The most valuable learning is often simple and practical. It comes from books, observation, mentors, experience, and reflection. It is not about collecting information for appearance, but about applying ideas for improvement. When learning is applied, it compounds just like habits. Each insight slightly improves judgment, communication, and execution. Over time, these improvements create noticeable change. People who prioritize learning take control of their development instead of leaving it to chance. They grow by design rather than by accident. Their progress may appear sudden to others, but it is the result of quiet preparation. Learning continuously refines who a person is becoming, shaping their capacity to lead, earn, and contribute. When learning becomes a daily discipline rather than an occasional activity, growth becomes inevitable because the mind is constantly being prepared for the next level of responsibility, and opportunity. Discipline is often misunderstood as restriction or punishment. But in reality, it is a clear expression of self-respect. It is the decision to honor your future by managing your present. When a person practices discipline, they're communicating to themselves that their goals, values, and potential matter. Each disciplined action, no matter how small, reinforces a sense of personal integrity. This internal agreement with oneself becomes a quiet source of strength because confidence grows when actions align with intentions. A lack of discipline is rarely about inability. It is more often about misplaced priorities. When comfort is consistently chosen over commitment, short-term relief replaces long-term growth. Discipline reverses this pattern by teaching a person to act based on values rather than impulses. It does not remove desire or emotion, but it places them in proper order. Over time, disciplined behavior reduces internal conflict because decisions become clearer and more consistent. Life feels less chaotic when choices are guided by purpose instead of mood. Discipline also protects energy. When boundaries are established around time, habits, and attention, fewer resources are wasted on distractions or regret. A disciplined person does not need to constantly negotiate with themselves because standards have already been set. This reduces decision fatigue and increases focus. The result is a greater sense of control, which naturally leads to higher self-esteem. People trust themselves more when they follow through on what they say they will do. Self-respect deepens as discipline strengthens. Each act of follow-through becomes evidence that one can be relied upon. This reliability extends beyond personal goals into relationships and responsibilities. Others sense consistency and dependability, which builds credibility. More importantly, the individual develops an internal standard that does not depend on external approval. Discipline becomes a private agreement, upheld even when no one is watching. Discipline does not require perfection, it requires commitment. Mistakes will happen, but a disciplined person returns to their standards instead of abandoning them. This resilience is what separates growth from stagnation. Over time, disciplined actions create momentum. What once felt difficult becomes habitual, and what once required effort becomes part of identity. The rewards of discipline are not immediate, but they are dependable. While undisciplined choices offer quick pleasure followed by long-term cost, disciplined choices often bring temporary discomfort followed by lasting benefit. This trade-off defines self-respect. A person who respects themselves is willing to endure short-term difficulty to protect long-term well-being. Discipline becomes the bridge between who someone is and who they are becoming, shaping a life that reflects intention rather than impulse, and building a foundation of pride that does not depend on circumstance or luck. The idea that it is too late to change is one of the most limiting beliefs a person can carry. Time passes regardless of whether growth is pursued, yet many people use age, past mistakes, or lost opportunities as reasons to stop trying. The truth is that rebuilding yourself is not tied to a specific stage of life. It is tied to a decision. The moment someone chooses to change their direction, the future opens again. Progress does not ask for permission from the past. It only responds to present action. Life is lived in phases, and each phase brings new awareness. What was impossible to understand at 20 may become clear at 40. Experience, even when painful, carries lessons that become valuable tools for rebuilding. What once felt like wasted years can turn into wisdom when properly examined. The past does not disqualify a person, it educates them. When someone reframes their history as preparation instead of punishment, energy shifts from regret to purpose. Many people delay rebuilding because they believe change must be dramatic to matter. In reality, rebuilding later in life often begins more efficiently because priorities are clearer. There is less need to prove something and more desire to build something meaningful. Maturity brings discernment, patience, and perspective. These qualities allow for focused growth rather than scattered effort. Rebuilding at any stage is not about catching up with others. It is about aligning with what matters now. Fear often increases with time, not because capability decreases, but because comfort zones become more established. Rebuilding requires the courage to disrupt familiar patterns, even when they no longer serve. This courage is not reckless, it is deliberate. It grows with each small action taken despite doubt. As movement begins, confidence follows. Action proves that change is not only possible, but sustainable. Every day presents an opportunity to reset direction. A single decision can alter habits, environments, and outcomes. The belief that rebuilding must have started earlier only creates hesitation today. The best time to begin is not defined by age or circumstance, but by readiness. Readiness is not a feeling. It is a choice to stop postponing growth. People who rebuild themselves later often do so with deeper intention. They value progress over appearance and substance over speed. Their growth may be quieter, but it is grounded and lasting. Rebuilding at any stage is an act of self-belief. It declares that life is still responsive, that potential is still present, and that the future is shaped by what is done next, not by what has already passed. As we come to the end of this message, remember that rebuilding yourself is not a single decision made once in a lifetime. It is a series of decisions made daily. It begins with taking responsibility, continues with changing from the inside out, and grows through small, consistent actions. It is fueled by learning, strengthened by discipline, and made possible at any stage of life. Nothing you have heard today requires perfection, privilege, or perfect timing. It requires honesty, effort, and the courage to begin again. Your future is not shaped by what happened yesterday, but by what you choose to do next. Every thought you adjust, every habit you improve, and every standard you raise becomes part of the structure you are rebuilding. Progress may be slow at first, and recognition may not come immediately, but growth is always working when effort is sincere. Stay patient with the process and firm with your commitment. The life you want is built from the person you are willing to become. I wish you the strength to start, the discipline to continue.